It's the most important car that no American has ever heard of. It wasn't fast, but it looked to the future, and it came from France. The Citroen DS. Side note, as I was recording this, it started to rain so hard Noah's gonna need a second arc. So if you hear background noise, I do apologize in advance. But we're gonna go away from our current monsoon back to before World War II, where Citroen was becoming a pioneering automaker with the Traction Avant, with its crash-resistant unibody and rack and pinion steering. And they wanted to follow up that success with a new model, especially after World War II when they were doing their reconstruction phase, and they were sort of humiliated by the Nazis by getting completely taken over in about a month. So they were eager to getting back to their pioneering ways and showing what France could do. And they had a little bit of a head start. The DS, as it would be called, was actually in development on and off for 18 years, including during Nazi rule. That is some devotion to the cause that I respect. And it was a great looking car. The body was designed by Flavio Bertoni. Not that Bertoni, the Citroen guy, because he also designed the Traction Avant and the 2CV. Now, it was supposed to have a air-cooled flat 6, like the up-and-coming Porsche 356. However, money issues meant that it received an upgraded Traction Avant 4-cylinder. They did have some pretty good upgrades though, like aluminum cross-flow heads and hemispherical combustion chambers that boosted horsepower to 75. It was not going to be a fast car. But that's not why it's so famous. It's famous because of its revolutionary hydropneumatic suspension. I'm going to try to explain this to the best of my capabilities without going into too much detail. You see, instead of having springs on each corner, the wheels are connected to a hydraulic system containing pressurized nitrogen. And in that pressurized nitrogen, there is a cylinder full of specialized hydraulic fluid. That cylinder is connected to another piston, which is attached to the suspension itself, and finally a damper valve is thrown in there for some absorption. It's a lot, I know. But don't worry, it gets more complicated, because all four corners were attached to a height corrector system, which could automatically adjust each corner to one of 5 levels set by the driver on the little dashboard. And it did this by, rather simply, increasing or decreasing the amount of high-pressure fluid. And the real cool thing about this was the height corrector could even balance the car on 3 wheels to assist in tire changes. The result of all this incredible suspension technology was a near-perfect ride, even on the harshest rural roads of France. The suspension quality was so smooth that photographers used the estate version for filming since the camera ended up being so stable. And the advanced tech didn't stop there. It had power steering, a semi-automatic gearbox, safer swiveling headlights just like a Tucker 48, and a fiberglass roof to lower the center of gravity. It was also the first mass production car to use disc brakes, which is a pretty big statement because the same year it launched, Jaguar won the 1955 24 Hours of Le Mans with their D-Type, which also had disc brakes. It was an incredibly innovative car, and it was incredibly important, not just for the auto industry, but for France as a whole. Coming out of the decimation of World War II, it was a source of pride for the rebuilding nation that showed what they could do with their technology and with their spirit. It was an incredible car for that. And when it came time to vote the Car of the Century in 1999, a panel of 133 judges from 33 nations ended up placing the Citroen DS third most important car of the century, just behind the Mini and the Model T. I mentioned previously it had a whopping 75 horsepower, and given it's a front-wheel drive, luxury-focused sedan, it seemed rather inadequate for motorsports. But in that French quirky way, it succeeded in the rough-and-tumble world of rallying. It entered its first event in the 1956 Monte Carlo Rally, and it won its class. 3 years later, it won the event outright along with the entire European Rally Championship. And it wasn't just the sprints that it excelled at, endurance rallying was another specialty. It entered its first global competition in the 1965 East Africa Safari Rally, where only 16 of 70 cars finished the rally. And of those 16, 5 of them were Citroen DS 19s. It won the 1974 London to Safari to Munich World Cup Rally as one of only 5 cars to finish the event. And it was on track to win the brutal 7,000-mile London to Sydney Marathon in 1968, when just 98 miles from the finish line, it was crashed into by a drunk driver in a Mini Cooper. Which is a bit ironic, because 2 years earlier, the DS took a surprise victory in the 1966 Monte Carlo Rally when the winner was disqualified for having the wrong headlight filament. The original winner was a BMC Mini. Now, motor racing is all well and good, but if you want to get into the mass public attention, you gotta get into a pop culture icon, and this did just that. It featured in Cary Grant's 1962 film The Touch of Mink. Then, a custom version called The Reactor was used in everything from the original Batman, Bewitched, and Star Trek the original series. And then we have French President Charles de Gaulle. His motorcade used almost exclusively Citroën DS's, and he personally rode in one. And his motorcade was later ambushed in 1962, and despite having all 4 tires riddled with machine gun fire, the unarmored Citroën DS escaped the ambush, saving the president's life, and from that point on, he only bought Citroën vehicles for the entire remainder of his presidency. On the other side of the law, it was used by the infamous French Connection smuggling ring, which shipped a record 1,606 pounds of heroin into the US by smuggling them into Citroën DS's, which is now worth over $1.1 billion in today's money. That's a lot of heroin. But like most cars, even if it is a pop culture icon or a motorsport success, you do need to update it from time to time, even though it was a massive sales success, 1.3 million units. So to try and keep the sales high and stave off the inevitable decline, they rolled out a new 2.3-liter 4-cylinder version in the 1970s with electronic fuel injection making 141 horsepower. But it didn't work. Sales were still slumping. Not only was it expensive, 65% more than the previous Traction Avant, it also couldn't be sold in the US. We had headlight laws that made its innovative swivel headlights all but impossible to legalize. And even if it was for sale here in the US, it's highly unlikely it would sell well. For the same price, if not cheaper, you could get a big, comfy 4-seater sedan with a 7-liter V8 making 3 times the horsepower. Which means that finally, after 20 years in 1975, the final DS rolled off the line, getting replaced by the SM and the CX models. But Citroën continues to keep the DS name alive with the DS Automobile brand in 2009, and they make high-end crossover and hatchbacks, including the brilliantly mad DS3 Racing making 207 horsepower, and just like its older brother, they took it rallying, winning 26 rallies and 4 WRC titles in 2011 and 2012, and it set the fastest average rally speed in WRC history at 126.6 kilometers per hour in Rally Finland, a rather fitting tribute to the Citroën that came before it.